Rome did not die in a single night of fire and screams. It did not collapse beneath the boots of barbarians alone, and it did not vanish into history the way legends would later claim, because if you stood on the streets of Rome in the year 476 and listened closely, you would not hear the end of the world. You would hear a transformation quietly beginning.
A reshaping of power, identity, and memory that would echo for centuries. And to understand whether the Roman Empire truly fell or was merely rebranded, we must abandon the comforting simplicity of collapse and step into a far more complex, unsettling, and human story that begins not with destruction, but with continuity, ambition, survival, and adaptation, because Rome had been changing long before the last emperor in the West was removed.
Long before Romulus Augustulus was stripped of his title by the Germanic general Odoacer, long before later historians would draw a bold line between antiquity and the Middle Ages. And in truth, Rome had been evolving since the moment it became an empire, since Augustus cloaked monarchy and republican language, since legions enforced peace across 3 continents, since citizenship expanded beyond the city itself, turning Rome from a place into an idea. And ideas are far harder to kill than cities or emperors.
As the empire expanded, it absorbed peoples, gods, languages, and traditions, and this flexibility became its greatest strength, and eventually the source of its perceived weakness, because Rome did not conquer by erasing cultures, but by integrating them, offering roads, law, order, and identity in exchange for loyalty. And over time, the provinces became Rome just as much as the city on the Tiber. So when crisis came, it did not strike a single heart, but many interconnected organs. And those crises began earlier than popular imagination allows. With the 3rd century crisis, when emperors rose and fell at terrifying speed, when civil war, plague, inflation, and invasion shook the empire to its core, yet even then Rome adapted, reorganizing its military, reforming its economy, and redefining authority under emperors like Diocletian, who abandoned the illusion of shared republican power and openly embraced autocracy, dividing the empire into manageable parts, ruling not as first among equals, but as a distant, sacred monarch, a shift that horrified traditionalists but stabilized the state. And this division, later formalized into Eastern and Western halves,
Is crucial to understanding what people call the fall. Because Rome did not vanish in 476, it continued very much alive in the East, in Constantinople, calling itself Roman for nearly 1,000 years more, governed by Roman law, defended by Roman armies, ruled by Roman emperors. And when modern historians label this continuation the Byzantine Empire, they impose a name that the people themselves would not recognize, because to them, there was no Byzantine Empire, only the Roman Empire, enduring in a new form. And even in the West, the idea of Rome did not disappear with the deposition of an emperor.
because by that point, the emperor in the West was already a shadow, a symbol without real power, while military strongmen and barbarian kings ruled in his name or alongside him, adopting Roman titles, wearing Roman dress, enforcing Roman law, because Roman legitimacy was still the most valuable currency in the political world of late antiquity. And Odoacer himself did not declare a new kingdom opposed to Rome. He sent the imperial regalia to Constantinople and asked the Eastern emperor to recognize him as a Roman official governing Italy, a remarkable act that speaks volumes about continuity rather than collapse.
And even earlier so-called barbarian invasions were less about annihilation and more about integration, because many of the Goths, Vandals, and Franks who crossed Roman borders were not mindless destroyers, but migrants, refugees, and federated allies fleeing pressure from other groups, especially the Huns. And Rome often welcomed them, settled them, and enlisted them, granting land in exchange for military service, blurring the line between Roman and barbarian until it became almost meaningless. As generals with barbarian ancestry commanded Roman legions and defended Roman cities. And Christianity, too, reshaped Rome from within. not as a corrosive force that weakened the empire as older narratives claimed, but as a unifying ideology that provided new structures of authority and loyalty when old civic religions lost their hold, and as bishops replaced magistrates as community leaders, as the church inherited administrative roles once filled by imperial officials.
Roman governance did not vanish, but flowed into new channels, preserving literacy, law, and institutional memory through monasteries, councils, and canon law. And when we speak of the sack of Rome in 410 by Alaric, or the later sack by the Vandals in 455, we must remember that these events were traumatic symbols rather than apocalyptic endings. Shocking because Rome had once seemed eternal, yet the city recovered, life continued, and the empire endured elsewhere, and the very idea of an eternal Rome outlived its political unity.
Because after the Western imperial title disappeared, new rulers rushed to claim Roman legitimacy, from the Ostrogothic king Theodoric, who ruled Italy as a Roman-style monarch, maintaining the Senate and administration, to the Frankish king Clovis, who adopted Roman Christianity, to Charlemagne, who was crowned emperor of the Romans in 800, reviving the imperial title in the West, not because Rome was dead, but because its authority was still unmatched, and even the Holy Roman Empire, despite its many contradictions, drew power from the belief that Rome's legacy could be inherited, transformed, and reborn. And throughout this long transition, daily life for many people did not abruptly collapse into darkness, as popular myths of the Dark Ages suggest, because archaeology shows continuity in farming, trade, craftsmanship, and settlement patterns in many regions, with gradual change rather than sudden ruin. And while urban life declined in some Western areas, it flourished in others, and the Eastern Empire remained a beacon of wealth, learning, and stability, preserving Greek and Roman texts that would later fuel the Renaissance. And Roman law itself never died, compiled under Justinian into the Corpus Juris Civilis, influencing legal systems across Europe for centuries, shaping ideas of justice, property, and governance that still underpin modern states. And even language bears Rome's imprint, as Latin evolved into the Romance languages, spoken daily by millions, a living testament to continuity disguised as change. And so when historians debate whether Rome fell or transformed, they are really questioning how we define an ending, because empires rarely end with clean finality. They dissolve, fragment, and reconfigure, leaving behind structures that new societies build upon. And Rome's military power in the West may have weakened, its tax base eroded, its political unity fractured, but its cultural, legal, and ideological foundations proved remarkably resilient, surviving in churches, kingdoms, and memories that shaped medieval Europe. And even the notion of Europe itself emerged from the Roman world, as former provinces redefined themselves within a shared Christian and Roman heritage. And if Rome truly fell in 476, why did its emperors rule in Constantinople until 1453? Why did its laws govern medieval courts? Why did its language echo in sermons and treaties? Why did kings and popes alike seek Roman approval? And why do modern capitals still borrow Roman symbols of power, from domes to senates to imperial eagles? And perhaps the answer is unsettling because it challenges our desire for neat historical narratives. Because Rome did not fall like a statue toppling from a pedestal. It melted into the soil of Europe and the Mediterranean, nourishing new civilizations. And what later generations called the fall was in many ways a rebranding, a shift in aesthetics, authority, and identity rather than an extinction. And yet this transformation was not painless or peaceful, because wars, plagues, and economic decline did bring suffering. Cities shrank, infrastructure decayed, and lives were lost. But these hardships did not erase Rome, they reshaped it. And to those living through the transition, there was no clear sense that an age had ended, only that the world was changing, as it always had. And perhaps that is the most Roman truth of all, because Rome's greatest legacy was not its marble monuments or legions, but its capacity to adapt, to absorb, to redefine itself in the face of crisis, and in doing so, to endure far longer than any single political structure. And so when we ask whether the Roman Empire really fell or was rebranded, we are asking whether history is made of endings or evolutions, whether civilizations vanish or transform, and whether the echoes of Rome still shape our world, not as a ghost of a dead empire, but as a living foundation beneath modern society.
Whispering that nothing truly great ever disappears, it simply changes its name, its language, its rulers, and its symbols, carrying the past forward into the future, long after the banners have fallen and the emperors are gone.